Jesse and Juliana. How are you doing today? It's a fantastic morning, 3rd of July. Are you ready for the big conversation which is coming your way? Before we get into our big conversation, just wanted to finish with your responses. If you had just 1 minute to talk to His Excellency, 1 minute, what would you say? Somebody here said, I would tell him, I know that you have been through a lot and you have done a fantastic job, and I just wish you good health and a long life. Thank you.
Okay.
Just
Sounds
1 minute
good.
to say something to His Excellency.
You know, sometimes we think that when you have a minute, you have to yap a lot. You don't have to yap a
to
lot.
present problems.
Exactly. You can just say one word and it's very meaningful. You know, like how often we ask each other, how are you? Like me, I said I would ask him one word. How are you? Ask yourself how many people ask him that. It's very, very important. And also thanking him. Because, I mean, he has seen all his writings and all that, but having time and tell him, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Somebody here, this is Jamie says, I would say, Your Excellency, please increase support for made in Rwanda products. It's time we consumed what we produce. I thought we already do.
We were doing a lot of that.
We're doing a lot of that.
I think maybe he is the kind of person who is in that business and he feels like he's not selling enough. And but also, guys, what are you doing, you as a person who is in that business, to increase on the sales? What are you doing before you ask the president? What are you doing? You see that everything starts with us. The way they say discipline starts with you. It's the same thing with what we're talking about. What are you doing? Who's doing the made in Rwanda products? How much are you selling? How much good customer care do you have to be able to sell? Some people are beating you at your game because they have better customer care. That is it.
Faith says, I would respectfully request him to consider longer maternity leave for working mothers. Says the current one feels like a nap.
3 months.
Is it 3 or 6?
3 was, I think, different
Not
organizations.
quite so sure. Another
see.
person says, they would say, could we have a national mental health day? We smile, but many are carrying heavy stuff
Yes.
silently. National mental health day. Said, if we had it, what would you do with it? A day to smile? No, a day to reflect.
To reflect and
To reflect on our mental health.
and be real.
Or to have
Maybe
more
go somewhere to a
speeches
mountain
at
and
the
scream
stadium.
your lungs out.
Another person says, I would say thank you for restoring our dignity. May God continue to guide you. And another says, please ban plastic straws again. The environment is crying. I thought they were banned.
Don't know.
I think I'm seeing more paper straws than plastic straws.
I'm also thinking a lot.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of paper straws.
Another person says, I would say, can you give every youth a one-time business capital boost? Will either fly or fail loud enough to be heard.
So the official maternity leave is 14 weeks. That's about 98 days. That's about three months, right? Yeah, it's almost 3 months. And I think that's not bad. 3 months is fine, really. And meanwhile, it is fully paid. That's why I need to get pregnant very fast.
Because you want to get off work.
My 3 months fully paid when I'm on leave.
For doing nothing.
For being a mother, it's not easy. Don't say that. You're not a mother. Don't even go there. Hey.
Apologies. Listen, we have to take a break and then come back to our big conversation. We have Isabella, the beautiful one, Masozera, in the studios with us. Have you seen her in black?
Oh my God.
She
she's
looks
stunning.
so beautiful.
She looks hot. I just don't know how much time she took on herself. But she just looks hot naturally.
You know, when I look at people like Isabel, that is when I agree with men that call their women honey.
Huh? So does she look like honey right now as we speak?
Let's first take a break.
Batman!
We have taken the time to introduce Wellness Thursdays with Isabel. Your weekly pause from the noise, where we get real about what's happening inside, not just on the outside. And on today's episode, the inaugural episode, it is titled, How Are You? All right? Really, how are you? And I'm so surprised because Juliana has kept on singing the same song. What would you ask His Excellency if you had 1 minute? And she says, I would ask, how are you? Because that simple question in itself hides a world of emotions that we often avoid. You see, we are great at pushing through, showing up, putting on the brave face,
Yeah.
but beneath that, many of us are running on empty.
Yeah.
So today we are slowing things a little bit down. We're not talking about entrepreneurship. We're not talking about money. We're not talking about the fancy things of what has happened in Qatar at with Wichita Airport. We just want to slow it down, and we're checking in, not just on the surface, but at the soul level.
Yeah.
And to help us to do just this is someone who knows the power of honesty and healing. Between me and Isabel, there are times when she's just given me this phone call and I said, hi, and I would hear somebody cry on the other side. And then I just listened to somebody cry. And I'm wondering, are we going to finish this phone conversation? Because it's a crying phone conversation.
Yeah.
And then she says, I'm sorry for putting this on you. Pam, pam, and the phone goes down. This is someone being honest with themselves and trying to be honest with their feelings, what they feel at that time. So grab your cup of coffee or tea, sit back and ask yourself this morning, how are you really? And let's talk about it. Isabel, welcome.
Thank you. What a way to introduce the topic.
I know.
Couldn't have been done better. And Juliana, the answer you gave is somebody asked you to speak to the, okay, gave you the opportunity to ask one question to the president. And you said, my question would be, how are you? It just means that this moment was meant to happen. This conversation
know,
was
right?
actually meant
Like
to
a
happen.
coincidence.
And I love that we are all aligned in that. And Jesse, you talk about a phone call saying, how are you? And on the other side, it's like wailing. And I want to even come back to the way you introduced this topic. You said, how are you? You hear
Really?
the pauses in
Yeah.
the way he's asking that question. We live in a very fast-paced world. People get the opportunity to say, how are you, when they're walking past you, right? Hey, how are you? They say, hi, how are you, when you're getting into a meeting.
Yeah.
You
Hello.
know, hello, how are you? You know, it's there's really no commitment, there's no intentionality, there's no time budgeted.
Yeah.
So it's a we have to be intentional in how we ask how are you. The greatest question I ever asked the president,
Oh,
funny
'cause
enough,
you actually talked to him.
I
yes.
have had the opportunity and the absolute honor of asking him a number of questions, whether it was in a sit down, whether it was at a press conference. But the greatest honor for me, and when you go on my social media, that is pinned on my wall, was, Mr. President, like, how do you prioritize your well being? You have a lot going on in your life, but now, you know, you have
mean,
a
it's a lot.
daughter, you have, you know, children,
Yeah.
grandchildren rather. Like, how does that play into your well-being, but also the kind of leader that you are today? And for me, I felt like that was such a packed question, and it laid space.
What was his response though?
It was such a beautiful space and response as well. He was as human can be. And he said, look, this is a space I go to just like any human being. And that's where he, you know, he obviously fills his cup. You know, he's a normal grandfather and a normal father who loves to spend time with his family, and you know that fills him up. But you can see the person relax, their shoulders go down, and you are having that human interaction. But I have to say that phone call, when you have to call somebody, you have to be ready with the I'm falling apart. Are you ready for that answer?
It's a question that is often underlooked by so many people. We don't usually ask people how they are in actual sense.
Yes.
We can just say, how are you passing by? Like you said. But honestly, if you ever sit down and take your time and ask someone, how are you? And give them a moment to breathe, they're going to break down. Because there's
Yes.
a lot going on.
Yes.
So I wanted to find
If
out.
you asked me that in the next probably hours and calmly, and you asked me, how are you? I will take some minute to respond, because it's a lot, and it's one question that people don't ask because honestly, people are going through a lot.
So you're
Yeah.
basically saying we ask, but we don't ask.
Yes.
All right.
You know how you're available, but you're not available. That's exactly.
So we ask the how are you? You pass by the receptionist. You say hi, how are you, and you move on. You don't even wait for the answer.
Yeah.
You
don't
just
even care.
Yeah, it's just like hey, and then you move on.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, why do you think people fear emotional honesty? I was telling Juliana
Very
earlier
good
on.
question.
My dad often gives me a call, and I fear to take the call. And when I want to call back, I'm thinking he's going to ask me, how are you doing? And he's expecting an answer from me.
Yes.
Now, myself, because I also know what he's going through, I fear to ask him,
Yes.
how are you doing? So last night, it was a series of how are you? How are you? Then, but you, how are you? How are you? And no one is giving a response. We
Yes.
just kept on going around this
Because
and
all
that.
of you
and-
are holding back.
But how are you? Why do we fear that emotional honesty?
It's such a relevant and timely question, especially like Juliana says right now. A lot of people are going through so much. I think the fear of honesty, and again, why the casual "how are you" and why the casual "I'm fine." I would say three things, but it boils down to fear, like you said. Fear. It's fear of responsibility, like I said earlier. Can I hold space should this person say I'm not okay? And also, do I have the right words? We live in a very triggering world. People are afraid of saying the wrong thing. Then the other part is also fear of our own emotions. If I respond, if I ask you, I have to also ask myself, can I answer genuinely? If I'm asking you, how are you, would, like you just said. And so what it boils down is, when you ask a question like that, should they open up and say, this is what is going on? It can stir up emotions, unresolved emotions within yourself. In a way, it's like holding a mirror to yourself. So all of this, whether you know subconsciously, that's what's going on in your mind. And so your body language, the tone of how you ask that question is influenced by that. But the other thing is, I would also say, the fear of our emotions does not just stem from just responsibility or things like that. It's also time and vibes.
Yeah.
That's the third thing I'll say, time and vibes. I also hinted on it earlier. At a networking event, everybody's so obsessed with being so cool.
Yeah.
Vulnerability does not appear cool. We live in a society that is built on community, strength, resilience. There are certain things that are the fabric of who we are as Rwandans. And so vulnerability does not really fit into what that looks like.
We want to be macho, trying to
A
show
little bit,
resilience.
yes.
And
So
we
you want to be
forget
like,
that-
I'm cool,
I
what's
know.
up? Let's roll with it.
And we forget
Yeah.
that it's okay to be vulnerable.
It is
it's
okay.
really okay.
And it's beautiful.
But society judges the vulnerable people. Do you know that? Like, you cannot be vulnerable
Yes.
because they're going to look at you as a weakling. Why are you even answering this? Why are you breaking down?
Yes.
They're going to look at you in a different way. So for that matter, you're going to soak in. You're going to suck in everything, take it inside, and pretend that everything is okay.
But what I always say is that's emotional suicide.
It is.
And so for me,
To cover up things.
Yes. So I tell my friends, Jessie is one of my really good friends, getting to know Juliana.
Yes.
We've known to get each other, Jessie, for so many years. So if Jessie gives me a call and say, Isabel, how are you? I'm not doing myself injustice and saying, I'm good. If I'm not good, I'm going to say, yo, listen,
But also, Isabel,
I'm not in a good place
I'm
right
going
now,
to
but
hold
thanks for
back
asking.
because I do not know. I don't trust the person asking me
There's also that. That's
get-
also a factor that plays
because
into that.
I'm not able to open up to that particular person because I do not know what they're going to do. Use my vulnerability against me. You know what I mean?
That's a valid point.
So I'm going to hold back.
But also, we have to be very careful, right? I think that sometimes we use that as an excuse because vulnerability is risky. It will always be risky. Even the person that you feel most safe with, comfortable with. You've had people married for 30, 40 years. You get a divorce and they are using what you shared in the courts of law. This is the person you've trusted the most. Are you going to go through 30, 40 years, Juliana, without opening up to somebody? Because you are afraid they're going to take what is most, private to you and use it in a wrong way. And no, you're not. So you have to be selfish, and you have to prioritize using space to have outlets. Because if you don't, it's like a pressure cooker. It's like piling and piling, and guess what's going to happen? It's going to come out at the wrong time when nobody has even asked you. You're going to go bleeding on people who didn't cut you. You're going to go, it's a far much danger for you to not open.
But also, it's not in the African setting. Let's just be honest. Or in the Rwandan culture, let's say, for that matter, to be vulnerable. Most especially for the men. I oftentimes feel sorry for the men. It's that particular species that the world doesn't look at in most times. And we assume they are fine because they are men, they need to man up. Men go through a lot emotionally, and they never get a chance to express themselves.
That's
because
true.
Society, specifically in Rwanda, has framed it that you are a man, you're not supposed to come out as a weakling, to actually to be able to be vulnerable and talk about your feelings and what you're going through, because you're not a man enough. An African man is not supposed to do that.
Yes.
What can we do to change that kind of? For me,
Basically, the question
so much.
should be, how do we normalize
Yes.
hard conversations with ourselves and among ourselves? How do we get to
there?
normalize the hard conversations?
I think I love how you're framing it, and I also love that you're going there when it comes to men's mental health. I have to say that it's sad, actually, that we don't acknowledge that men's mental health should be at the forefront of the conversation right now. The suicide rates among men and boys are higher.
Yeah, very
If you
true.
look at statistics. And it points to one thing: men are battling silently. And Juliana unpacked it all. As a society, we look at, let's go back even to the African traditional society. I know we live in modern days today, but not a lot has changed. The woman was to care. The man was to provide, to protect. Everything about that is responsibility. You have to fix it. You have to figure it out. And so young boys are raised that way. When a young boy falls down, what do? It has to go back to our household. How are we raising our young boys and young girls? When a girl falls down, everybody, daddy's girl. You see that? That is, you carry boo-boo, you kiss the boo-boo, you do that. When a boy cries, what do we tell him? You're a man.
And every time we say mommy's boy,
Mommy's boy,
they
that
say,
there's a negative
you can
connotation
never
to
make
that.
a good man."
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. You're weak, you're that, but it should not be that.
Guys,
As a matter of fact,
sorry, I cut you short. The other day,
that should
my
be a
son
good
fell
thing.
down,
Yeah.
and I told him, "You need to man up." Then I told myself, "Oh my God,
You
that's
caught
wrong.
yourself.
I'm being harsh."
but
to this
you
boy.
can imagine you didn't even mean it. It's
No.
conditioning.
Yeah.
You've had it so much that it's in your subconscious and it's reflex. So we have to be intentional in our homes. We have to normalize crying. We have to normalize tough conversations. If your young man comes home and says, "I've impregnated a teenager," are you sending him away?
To prison?
Are you? What are you doing about that? Are you going to sit down and actually have the conversation of how did we get here?
No, we are going to have the conversation is going to be like this, like an African parent. It's time to man up now.
Now
Be ready to
provide. But you've not unpacked the emotional side of this young man. Now this is not to negate or to take away from what the young girls are going through. We've created spaces. There's more to be done, but I'm proud of what we're doing when it comes to teen pregnancy. I myself have held countless conversations, whether on radio, on TV. Have I ever held a conversation about what happens when a young boy gets a young girl pregnant?
Yeah.
What does their life look like after that? Have we investigated that? Because it's not that every young boy wakes up in the morning wanting to go do something like that. So when something like that happens, it changes everything. Dreams are shattered, fear, shock, responsibility overnight. This has the potential to impact this young boy's mental health.
You
Who is
see,
looking into that?
I have a story to that. In a family where a son of 16 years and they had a house help who was barely 20. And so the 16-year-old gets the housemaid pregnant. All right. And it was such a situation in this family because the first thing they did was to send the girl away, not knowing that the maid was actually carrying their son in the home.
Wow.
And it was too tough when the girl reveals that it is actually your
Son's child, yeah.
that I've done stuff with, slept with, and so I'm carrying
Who was older there?
the girl. Barely 20. The boy is just 16. And now they're pregnant. What do you do in such a situation? Too much to unpack.
It is so much to unpack.
It's a
But
lot.
conversation, I say healing, transformation begins with conversation.
Yeah.
We need to have these conversations. We can't hide our heads in the sand. Let's sit down with this young man. Let's find out. There could have been rape. How did this young boy start having sexual intercourse with somebody, sometimes possibly almost the age of the mother? That's not normal behavior. That's not something a young boy just wakes up and does. You as a parent, where's your responsibility in that? We're leaving our children to these nannies. We're leaving our children to Netflix. We're having cartoons now that are talking about sex in all forms.
Yes.
You know, you wake up in the morning and you find out your son is, say, gay, right? And then
There's an LGBT cartoon going on.
Exactly. And then you are punishing this young boy and you're doing all these things. Yeah, okay, so he decides this is how he affiliates sexually. There's absolutely nothing wrong with him arriving at that decision if you do not unpack where it came from and how he got there. It's on you. You understand?
I also think,
we have
Isabella,
to understand and hold space.
I think parents of even our parents did that as well, but I think there was a way they would do it. It was a little bit different. But however, parents we have a problem. It takes us a very long time, or we never have that time to have what they still call sex education with our children. We do not have that. And honestly, the world we are living in,
It's teaching them.
It's actually you may run away and shy away from sex education with your teen kids. They are going to learn that from the internet and elsewhere.
And then you also
we need to have these conversations
But Juliana,
with our kids.
before we even have them, I go back to the issue of empathy, leading with empathy, holding space for these tough conversations. It's one thing to go into a conversation and just traumatize your child. Because sex ed that we had when we were growing up was, my mother told me, and I've said this countless times on radio, if I have a child, she is going to throw that child in the toilet and I shall hear that child cry every single day so I can never get pregnant
was
again as a
traumatizing.
teenager. That is how I stayed, a virgin for a very long time. Is that what I'm going to tell Myla today? My 14-year-old is very informed. She reads a lot.
The internet is
so
everywhere.
The internet is so you have to go into these conversations leading with empathy, but also armed with information. Because if you're talking about sex, what forms of sex are you talking about? I talked about the LGBTQI community. You have to address the whole spectrum. If you're talking about heartbreak, you have to come at that with some information, perhaps some tools they can navigate. We have a lot of work
as
to do.
current parents.
Yes.
Are we doing I would be putting in any effort to actually have this conversation with our kids.
First of all,
In one or the other.
first
Are
of
we
all-
No,
doing,
we're not.
We
We're
are
not
not.
doing
Honestly,
much.
we are not.
first of all, I feel sorry for myself and for some of you. I don't know what your parents taught you about sex. My parents told me nothing. So I have
My parents.
Should
I'm
you
gonna
feel
tell
sorry for us or should we feel sorry for you?
no
sorry for you.
because I don't know what they told
My
you.
parents never talked about sex until I never had anything like that. But I remember in school when we were growing up, I think we're like 14, 15, we used to have a session with some some elderly woman in
At school.
And they went, and then I went back home and told my mom what the matron said, because I think that was an icebreaker for her. And then she had the gap to be able to sit down. But when I I remember my mom talking about sex and having sex and children and all that was when I was about 16 years. Because now your hormones are raging and your
Yes.
mother can see, can read from how you're behaving. And then she sat down and said, there's this. First of all, the story was, there's what you've heard of HIV in school. That was how the conversation started. So I think that was a nice break. And then she was able to tell us
a
how you should
typical
stay
parent.
away,
Yeah.
how the Bible says you're supposed to actually sleep with one man who will marry you. I think in that version.
Yes.
And it helped us to be able to open. But this is not...
It is not relevant today.
It is
The issue that I feel, and I want to go back to mental health and mental check-ins. If you come at it from a place of, this is a mental check-in with my kids, and you actually look at it as a scheduled thing with your children. So I'll give you an example. Obviously, being a wellness advocate, my kids have grown. My son started saying self-love is something. Self-love is a priority. I have this memory of, he was barely 2 years old. But yes, and I think there's a little video somewhere. But other traditional spaces, homes, they don't do that. But you have to. Don't come and talk to your children about sex ed as we do it at school. There has to be a difference between you as the parent and an educator. There's an emotional bond with you and your child. Prioritize that, capitalize on that. When you come at them from a place of, I love you, I care about you, I respect your boundaries, I want to have a conversation, let me know how far we can go. You know, I want to know what you know, what you do not know. I don't want you to make the mistakes I've made. This is what's out there. You know, look at it. When you look at wellness, we have what we call sexual wellness. Approach it from that space. Educate yourself about what sexual wellness is. If it's a young girl, maybe start with talking about, you know, what makes you feel good in your body. When you take a shower, can you take time to really enjoy that shower, take that cold bath, feel good, teach them self-love, self-care.
Is this a question, for instance, from a mother to the son? What
To the
makes you
daughter.
feel-
Yeah,
the daughter.
to the
So
daughter,
who
for
speaks to the
example.
son?
I think the mother should speak to the son as well.
I think both. I think when the
Because
father should be able to
because
speak.
when even the father
Maybe
should
some
be
of us
able
who are
to
single
speak.
mothers who are raising
I'm
boys of our
I'm
own.
raising it actually. Thank you,
Yes.
Juliana and I keep thinking the same thing because we live in a very fatherless generation. Unfortunately, a lot of moms are raising children alone. It's why you see movies like Straws.
Yeah.
You know, that just came out. Taraji P Henson, and I'm so grateful that a movie like that came out because I remember starting Masozera Africa. This is why we started a space like that. These moms are going through so much, and there's not so many places a woman like that. So, for example, Juliana of today, who are the many, can go. We have spaces for the have-nots whose needs are, I just need to survive, I just need food for today. But we also have spaces for mothers who are navigating divorce. The boy's dad just left him. And I have to figure out how to help this young man not take whatever pain is coming out of this divorce and wreck his own life. Or start looking at love and relationships from a place of pain. You understand? And so what happens is, if, for example, it's a teenager, they're going to start drinking. They're going to start, you know, being susceptible to addictions and things like this. So I think moms should be able to talk to their sons. It's easier to talk to your daughter. That's easy. But I think we should normalize hard conversations.
People often talk about the emotional mask. All right, smiling on the outside, struggling on the inside. I don't think many of you, apart from saying I look sleepy, have
Yes.
ever seen me in a situation where you could easily tell I'm going through a lot.
Apart from me.
I have.
You have?
I have. It's just at some time I actually have those moments. I've seen you and I feel like, oh my God, I wish I could. I'm like, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
But I do not know how to
How
express.
to say it,
Yes.
yeah, or how to be there.
What signs then, if you say that you have seen me like that, what signs should we look out for in ourselves, in others, that something might be wrong beneath the surface? You know,
Yeah.
how do you just tell something
It's a good question.
is wrong beneath they surface.
Yeah.
At least I know of Joy Love. You know Joy Love.
Yes.
She's the one who normally comes to my desk and just says, "Are you okay?"
That's really lovely.
And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine."
And you fake it.
Really?
We need to work on
Okay.
that. Men, it's okay to
And
say
you
I'm
fake
not
it and
okay.
say- He
Yes.
fix it and he says, I am good.
But can I just say something? If we forget anything I ever said about men, ever, okay? Can we remember that I said that a vulnerable man is a sexy man?
No doubt.
I am a
I
vulnerable
love
man.
vulnerable men.
Because vulnerability means you're emotionally available.
Yes.
You can be present.
Yes.
And there's nothing a woman wants more than that. You can have all the money in the world, but a man who can truly be present and be okay with being weak, that's a really attractive man. So, Jesse.
Not a crybaby.
I mean, you could.
See, these are the things we need
They
to
were trying
change.
to
We can't
avoid,
be
yes.
saying cry baby.
It's okay to even cry.
We
but
cannot
don't
be
say
saying
crybaby.
that. We can't
Because
say.
crybaby is looked at oh, he's weak. He's
Yes.
not that-
And you know how we say that a man's tears should flow inward? It falls within that category of like stigmatizing, the situation. So we shouldn't say that. I think it's a very sexy thing for
So I
men to
have this
cry.
life group where we congregate normally once in a blue moon, and we were talking about men who cry during their vows,
Yes.
in the exchange of vows,
And there's nothing wrong with that.
and all,
actually
all,
beautiful.
all the
It's very
ladies
lovely.
say
It's
they would not
sexy.
want a man like that.
I
The
wouldn't
ladies
mind.
say that?
Yes.
Okay, so
What-
first
what are
of
you
all,
crying for?
I think
First
let me
of
tell
all-
you, Isabella, I think girls have a problem.
Yes,
Some
we
of
do.
us, we do have a problem that we like to look like, when we say we don't like men who cry. No, I don't like a man who cries because you look like how can I
you're
say?
desperate, you're needy, you're all
exactly.
of these things. No.
But no, it's not true.
I want to add on what Juliana is saying. I think that we are living in a world where people are broken. People are walking around with emotional wounds. People they've not dealt with grief. You go from one relationship to another. You don't take the time to really grieve. Because remember, the Christians talk about soul ties. If you've exchanged a kiss, if you've cuddled, if you've gone as far as sexual intercourse, you've bonded your lives.
You have.
It's a
Absolutely,
death.
yes.
It's an emotional death. It's like a physical death. You have to mourn that. And so when you leave that, you're coming in with fear of commitment, fear of being vulnerable again, fear of heartbreak. So this is where women develop walls, right? You wall up and you're like, okay, I'm going to be a hard chick.
Hardcore.
So I need a guy. You hear things like, I don't do commitment. I
don't
don't
want
do
a serious
labels.
relationship.
I want a casual relation. That's pain speaking.
True.
That's not honesty.
Yeah.
And there's no woman. Okay, very few. I'm not saying it's a no. Maybe some of them genuinely don't want lovey-dovey things, but those are very, very
I
few.
think
Maybe
no-
a 10%.
I think even a 5%.
Even a 5%.
The
Most
ones who
women.
are saying that are damaged.
Yes, you're speaking often from a place of pain,
We
of
all
heartbreak.
do. When you've just
Yeah.
had a heartbreak, we all do
And that should be a red flag, by the way, guys. If you are in a relationship with a woman who is not demanding that you show up to love them maybe within their love language, and those love languages can be wide, but they all come down to a man being emotionally available. If it's presence, you have to go and pick it up.
Let me tell you,
If
Isabella.
it's words of affirmation, you need to be able to be emotional and tell me that.
I brought up a question to this lady.
The men have made it difficult for us. Even when, that's why we're having those walls. We can't even express how we feel because we are avoiding we're avoiding to look like we're nuisances. You become a nuisance in someone's face because you're expressing how you miss them, how much you love them. You are bringing the authentic self. Then someone makes you look like
We are in the world of emojis.
you
You
know.
should have said that in
So-
one emoji.
So I will do this. I'm going to hold back and be a gangster and pretend to be like I ain't feel nothing.
But going back to what Jesse is called emotional honesty, and what I said is like literally emotional suicide. We are becoming people pleasers, and it's to our own detriment. You cannot tell me that you're worried about what Jesse is thinking about you more than you're worried about yourself. There's no honesty in that. And by the way, that's not selflessness. That's self-neglect.
Yes.
You know, so at the end of the day, you have to be able, if it's a relationship, both of you need to have, I have a problem with the kind of dating we're doing today. Leave alone chat GPT nowadays, even good morning is put in chat GPT to send
How
to
to
me.
say it better.
How to say it
The other day
better.
it shut
This
down for
is-
a few hours and people were
Thank
suffering.
God, thank God. You know, we haven't even talked about what the impact of these AIs on our water and whatever. Well, that's a conversation for another day. It's not what we're talking about, but we need to leave that. If you want to have a this is why we have high divorce rates. Everybody's performing. You know, you go on a date, someone takes you to Cultura. It's Cultura, whatever you the pronunciation is. They take you to a very fancy place. Now you look around, you're like, I really want to eat my chirai, but I have to try sushi. You don't even know how to use the
You're going
sticks.
to choke on those sticks.
When I was younger, I wasn't even 20 yet, I think around 19, before I got married, I used to have a rule. If a guy said, I'm taking you out on a date, I would order ribs or a burger.
Because it's easy to hold.
No,
Eh.
because I wanted everything to go down my cheeks. And I wanted to look at the reaction of this guy, looking at this cute little chick with her makeup on, her red heels on, and so smartly
You're
dressed
just being yourself.
herself. And I wanted to know, can you deal with that? Because performance was not going to work for me. And so we need to go back there. You know, this business of like, so when you finally reach an emotional point, you've had a real challenge in your relationship, you both come crashing down. You've not built a way to communicate. How can you communicate with someone you don't know?
We've run out of time, Isabel. This is a very interesting conversation.
Yeah,
There's
but,
so-
but Jesse,
there's so
we
many
need to
twists
answer
to
the question you asked. We kind of deviated. You asked, what are the things to show you someone is not okay?
Yes.
I want to do that in 2 seconds.
Please.
Number one, if you have a friend who used to be the life of the party and they're suddenly not showing up anymore, suddenly they've started to call themselves introverts or loners, those transitions don't happen overnight. Check in. If you have a friend who used to be the one that was like checking on other people and suddenly they are self-isolating, that could be a sign something is going wrong. In Rwanda right now, I can guarantee you there's a lot going on with our young people. And that's alcohol consumption is one of the things that you can easily look at. That friend of yours that you used to call and they're the ones advising you now every time you call at 10 a.m., they are drunk, check in. There are so many things, but it boils down to change in routine, change in the way they present. But also, there's when someone smiles and the smile does not reach the eyes. That I always say that's what you were talking about earlier with yourself. That's one of the fastest ways that you can recognize. But also, just ask, how are you?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
wanted to end with that. Some people say, I'm fine, when you ask, how are you, even when they're falling apart.
Yes.
Could there be a healthier way to respond when you are not okay without saying, I am fine, but you don't want to overshare?
Yes. Because I love that question because it deals with the fear. You know, yeah. How do you make sure you share, but you don't hold that responsibility and commitment? Yeah, there's a way to do that. First and foremost, you can say, I'm not okay. Yes, but I don't want to get into it right now. I've had a bit of a rough week. You've answered respectfully, but you've set a boundary as well. Yeah.
I have answered people before, but I'm actually not fine. I think the word was, I am surviving.
Yeah.
If someone was curious, if that person cares about you,
They'll ask. But Juliana,
Exactly.
there's 2 ways to answer. You have to keep in mind, you can answer inviting someone to have a follow-up question or get into your business, but also you can answer without wanting them to get into your business. So those are 2 ways you can navigate. So if you want, the way you said, I'm surviving, invites a
Yes,
question.
like if someone cares about you,
Yes.
they would want to know.
Yeah, but
What's
put a
going
caveat.
on?
Add something on the other side of it if you don't want to get into it, because it's important that your friends know where you are,
Yep.
right? So if you're not okay, don't say I'm okay. You know, say I'm not okay, but I don't want to get into it. I'm not okay, but I don't want to talk about this right now, right? Or I'm not in a place to unpack.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Lastly, Is the thing of friends still working for you, ladies?
Please explain that part.
What do you
Like,
mean?
my friends, especially when it comes to what goes on the inside of you, or do you find confidence who are not even friends?
I think I would say yes and no. Right. I think definitions of a friend and again, relational wellness. I know that over the weeks we're going to unpack a lot of this.
Yeah.
It has to come down to what wellness is, because friendship is a very intimate thing. And I remember I think it was Miss Naomi, one of the misses, that wrote on their wall that we underestimate losing a friend. It's on grieving that. We really, take a lot of time on heartbreak of a relationship between a man and a woman, emotional, whatever, romantic relationships, but not friendships. Friendships are very intimate, even more intimate, if I may dare say. So it's important to categorize.
Yeah.
A mentor of mine once talked to me about how you can, I would love to share this some other time, but you can categorize who is a close friend,
Yeah.
who is an acquaintance,
Yes.
who is a colleague, who is, because they all cannot wear the same hat, and that only calls for disappointment.
Isabel Masozera on Wellness Thursdays here with us. We've been unpacking how are you really the mental health check that we all avoid. She'll be back next Thursday. And as you can imagine, when we start talking
It
with
never
Isabel,
ends.
It will never
it
end.
never
That's
ends.
right.
News is up next. We have another conversation coming in.